The ships appeared without warning on a cold December morning, 2,000 of them. They filled the sky like a black curtain being pulled across the heavens. In New York, people stopped walking and looked up. In Tokyo, trains came to a halt as passengers pressed their faces against windows. In London, Paris, Mumbai, and São Paulo, millions of humans stood frozen as shadows fell across their cities. The Valdrix hegemony had arrived, supreme. Commander Zoreth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was tall, even by Valdrix standards, with gray skin that looked like polished stone and eyes that glowed a deep purple. He had conquered 47 worlds in his long career. He had never failed. And he did not expect to fail today. He pressed a button on his command chair. His voice traveled to every screen, every radio, every phone, and every speaker on the planet below. "People of Earth," he said, his voice calm and cold. "I am Supreme Commander Zoreth, of the Valdrix hegemony. Your planet now belongs to us. You have 72 hours to surrender all governments, all military forces, and all resources to our control. Kneel before the hegemony, and you will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and you will be erased from existence. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. You have been warned." The transmission ended. Silence fell across the world. Then came the panic. Emergency meetings began in every capital city. Military generals gathered their forces and ran calculations. The results were always the same. Earth's combined armies, navies, and air forces could not survive 10 minutes against the Valdrix fleet. Their technology was too advanced. Their weapons were too powerful. Their shields could stop nuclear missiles like they were raindrops. The United Nations Emergency Council met in a bunker deep beneath Geneva. World leaders argued and shouted. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender immediately. A few suggested hiding and waiting. But everyone knew the truth. Earth had no chance, while the world descended into chaos. Admiral Una Castillo sat alone in her office at the United States Naval Command. She was 53 years old with short gray hair and dark eyes that had seen too many battles. She had served her country for 30 years. She had fought in 3 wars. She had lost friends, soldiers, and pieces of her own soul along the way. And now, watching the alien ships hover over her planet, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Helplessness. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. The message contained only coordinates in 2 words: "Come immediately." There was no sender name, no explanation, just coordinates pointing to somewhere in Antarctica. Castillo stared at the message for a long moment. Then she grabbed her coat and walked out the door. 12 hours later, she stood in an elevator that was descending 3 miles beneath the Antarctic ice. The cold was so deep it seemed to seep into her bones despite the heated walls. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a massive underground facility that stretched further than she could see. A man was waiting for her. He was old, perhaps 70, with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. But his eyes were sharp and alert. "Admiral Castillo," he said, extending his hand. "I am Director Marcus Webb. Welcome to Project Midnight." "Project Midnight," Castillo repeated. "I've never heard of it." Webb smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of a man who had carried a heavy secret for too long. "That was the point," he said. "Please, follow me. There is much to explain in very little time." He led her through corridors filled with scientists, engineers, and military personnel. They passed laboratories, training facilities, and hangars that seemed to go on forever. Finally, they reached a massive window that looked out into an underground cavern so large it could have held a small city. Castillo stopped. Breathing ships. Hundreds of ships. Warships painted black as night, with engines that glowed a deep crimson red. They were sleek and deadly, designed for one purpose only. "War. 1,200 vessels," Webb said quietly. "Built over the past 40 years in absolute secrecy. Humanity's hidden fleet. The Midnight Armada." Castillo could not speak. She could only stare. In 1987, Webb continued, Earth made first contact. Not the kind they show in movies. Hostile alien probes entered our solar system. They scanned our planet and sent data back to their masters. We managed to shoot one down before it escaped. We recovered the technology. We studied it. We learned from it. And we realized something that changed everything. He turned to face her. We were not alone in the universe. And the universe was not friendly. So we began to prepare. Every major nation contributed in secret. Pilots reported dead in training accidents were recruited. Engineers who supposedly emigrated were brought here. Soldiers listed as casualties in classified operations joined our ranks. For 40 years, we built this fleet, trained these crews, and waited. Waited for what? Castillo whispered. For this moment, Webb replied. For the day someone came to our world and demanded we kneel. He placed a hand on her shoulder. The Valdrics think they have found a helpless planet full of primitive creatures. They think we have no secrets. They are wrong. And you, Admiral Castillo, are going to show them just how wrong they are. Castillo felt her heart begin to pound. The helplessness she had felt earlier was fading. Something else was taking its place. Something hot and fierce. Hope. Why me? She asked. Because you are the finest tactical mind humanity has produced in a generation, Webb said simply. Because you have never lost a battle you commanded. And because when you look at those alien ships, you do not see gods. You see targets? Was right. She did. The Valdrics have given us 72 hours, she said slowly. How long until the Armada can launch? 24 hours, Webb replied. The crews are ready. The ships are ready. They have been ready for years. All they need is a commander. Castillo looked at the fleet one more time. 1,200 ships. 1,200 chances to make the enemy bleed. She turned back to Webb and nodded. And let us give them a war they will never forget. 24 hours later. On the dark side of the moon, the Midnight Armada began powering its engines. 1,200 ships rose from their hiding places. Silent as shadows, deadly as nightmares above Earth. Supreme Commander Zorith looked down at the blue planet with contempt. The humans were negotiating surrender. They were begging for mercy. Just as he had expected, he had no idea that death was rising behind him, they commanded. Earth too bowed, then the Midnight Armada rose high and burned the sky red. Part 2. Shadows beneath the moon, the flagship Defiance was unlike any ship Admiral Una Castillo had ever commanded. It was massive, nearly a kilometer long, with armor plating that could withstand direct nuclear strikes. Its weapon systems were decades ahead of anything on Earth's public military records. And its crew was the finest humanity had to offer. Castillo walked through the corridors of her new command, taking in every detail. Soldiers saluted as she passed. Engineers ran final checks on systems that hummed with quiet power. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. A man fell into step beside her. He was tall and lean, with a calm face and intelligent eyes. His uniform bore the rank of commander. Admiral Castillo, he said with a slight bow. I am Commander Daisuke Tanaka, your second in command. Welcome aboard the Defiance. Castillo nodded. Commander Tanaka. I have read your file. Officially, you died in a training accident 7 years ago. Tanaka smiled slightly. Officially, many of us died. In reality, we simply changed our address. They walked together toward the bridge. Along the way, Tanaka explained what Castillo needed to know. The Armada is crewed by people from every nation, he said. Americans, Russians, Chinese, Indians, Brazilians, Nigerians, Koreans. We have trained together for years. We eat together. We sleep in the same quarters. We have become something new, not citizens of countries. Citizens of Earth? Castillo understood. This was not a fleet of nations. It was a fleet of humanity. The Valdrics have powerful technology, Tanaka continued. But they have never encountered a species that successfully hid an entire military branch for 4 decades. They believe they know everything about us. They have scanned our planet, intercepted our communications, studied our history, but they missed this. They missed us. And that mistake will cost them dearly. They reached the bridge. It was a wide, circular room with screens covering every wall. Officers sat at stations, monitoring data streams from across the fleet. At the center was the command chair. Raised slightly above the others, Castillo took her place in it. The chair felt right, like it had been waiting for her. "Status report," she said. "All 1,200 ships report ready," an officer announced. "Weapons charged. Shields operational. Crews at battle stations. And the Valdrix. They have begun demonstration strikes on Earth. Military bases in Nevada, Siberia, and the Australian outback have been destroyed. Empty bases, Admiral. We evacuated them yesterday. The Valdrix think they are showing strength. They are only wasting ammunition." Castillo allowed herself a small smile. While the world pretended to panic, Project Midnight had been quietly moving pieces into place. On Earth, the Valdrix continued their show of power. They destroyed empty buildings and abandoned airfields. They broadcast footage of explosions meant to terrify the human population into submission. But something strange was happening. Instead of hiding in fear, people were gathering in the streets. They stood on rooftops and in public squares, looking up at the sky with calm faces. Parents held their children close, but they did not run. Workers left their offices and joined the crowds, standing in silent defiance. Supreme Commander Zoroth watched the footage from his flagship and felt his confidence waver for the first time. He had conquered 47 worlds. On every one of them, the population had responded to his demonstrations with terror and despair. They had begged, they had wept, they had surrendered. But these humans were different. They were afraid, yes. He could see it in their eyes. But beneath the fear was something else. Something that looked almost like patience. Like they were waiting for something. "Increase the pressure," Zoroth ordered. "Destroy one of their major cities. That will break them." His officers hesitated. "Supreme Commander, our orders from the High Council were to preserve the population for labor purposes. Destroying a major city would—" "I gave you an order," Zoroth snapped. But before the order could be carried out, one of his censor officers spoke up with confusion in his voice. "Supreme Commander, we are detecting an anomaly near the moon, a gravitational disturbance of some kind." Zoroth frowned. "What kind of disturbance?" "Unknown, sir. It could be natural. But—" the officer paused, checking his readings again. "It is moving." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the darkness behind the moon erupted with light. 1,200 ships merged from the shadows like predators leaving their dens. Their hulls were painted black, invisible against the void of space until their engines ignited. And when those engines came to life, they burned a deep crimson red. Painting the darkness with the color of blood, the Midnight Armada had risen. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Castillo watched her fleet take formation around her. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Open a channel to all ships," she commanded. Channel open. Admiral Castillo stood from her chair and spoke to her fleet. "Soldiers of the Midnight Armada, for 40 years we have hidden in the shadows. We have trained in secret. We have prepared for a day we hoped would never come. That day is here. Behind us is Earth, our home, the cradle of everything we love. Before us is an enemy who came to our world and demanded that we kneel." She paused, letting the words sink in. "They think we are cattle waiting for slaughter. They think we are primitives who will break at the first sign of power. They are wrong. We are humanity. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. And when someone threatens our home, we do not hide. We fight." Across 1,200 ships, crews stood at their stations with fire in their hearts. "In 12 hours, we will engage the Valdrix fleet. Many of us will not survive. But those who fall will fall standing. Those who die will die fighting. And when this battle is over, the galaxy will know what happens when you corner the human race." She sat back down and gave the order that would change history. "All ships, advance. Let us burn the sky red." On Earth, people looked up as the night sky began to change. Where there had been only stars in the shadow of alien ships, there was now something else. A wall of crimson light, spreading across the heavens like dawn arriving in the wrong direction, A child pointed upward and asked her mother, "What is that?" Her mother stared at the red glow, and for the first time in 3 days, she smiled. "That," she said softly, "is hope." Supreme Commander Zorath stood on his bridge, watching the impossible fleet approach. His purple eyes were wide with shock. His gray skin had gone pale. "How?" he whispered. "How did they hide this from us?" No one had an answer. The humans had kept a secret for 40 years. They had built an army in the shadows. And now that army was coming for him? For the first time in his 200-year career? Zorath felt something cold crawl up his spine. "Fear," they commanded. The earth to bow. Then the Midnight Armada rose high and burned the sky red. Part 3. The sky burns red. The first shot of the battle came from the Defiance. Admiral Castillo watched from her command chair as a Sunbreaker missile launched from her flagship. It crossed the void between the two fleets in seconds and detonated directly in the center of the Valdrix formation. The explosion was not meant to destroy ships. It was meant to blind them. The nuclear flash overwhelmed Valdrix sensors. For 30 precious seconds, 2,000 enemy warships could not see anything but white light.
All ships.
"Engage," Castillo commanded. The Midnight Armada attacked. 1,200 human warships surged forward in perfect formation. They had trained for this moment for years. Every pilot knew their role. Every gunner knew their target. Every captain knew exactly what was expected of them, the Valdrix. Fleet was caught completely off guard. Commander Tanaka led the first fighter squadron directly into the heart of the enemy formation. His voice was calm over the communication channel as he gave orders to his pilots. Squadron 1, target the command ships on the left flank. Squadron 2, focus on shield generators. Squadron 3, clear a path for the heavy cruisers. Move fast, hit hard, and do not stop. The fighters were small and nimble, designed to slip between the gaps in Valdrix defenses. They darted through the chaos like wasps attacking a bear, stinging again and again. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Supreme Commander Zorath screamed orders at his officers. "Return fire. All ships, return fire." But the Valdrix fleet was designed for controlled, methodical warfare. They conquered worlds by overwhelming their enemies with superior numbers and firepower. They were not prepared for an enemy that attacked without warning, without negotiation, without any attempt at self-preservation. Valdrix ships began to fall. The first one exploded when a human cruiser cut through its shield generator and pumped 3 plasma torpedoes into its reactor core. The second fell when a squadron of fighters overwhelmed its point defenses and a heavy bomber delivered a killing blow. The third, fourth, and fifth fell in quick succession as human ships worked together with terrifying coordination. On Earth, people watched the sky burn. The battle was happening hundreds of kilometers above them, but they could see it clearly. Flashes of light, streaks of fire, explosions that bloomed like deadly flowers against the darkness. And through it all, the red glow of human engines, pushing forward, never retreating. A man in Beijing stood on his balcony with tears streaming down his face. "They are fighting," he whispered. "They are actually fighting back."
A
woman in Cairo fell to her knees and prayed for the souls of the soldiers above. Children in 100 countries pressed their faces against windows and watched as their species made its stand. The battle raged for hours. The Valdrix recovered from their initial shock and began to fight back with terrible effectiveness. Their weapons were still more powerful than anything humanity possessed. Their shields could absorb punishment that would destroy human ships instantly. And their commanders, though surprised, were experienced warriors who had won countless battles. Human ships began to fall. The cruiser, Thunderbolt, was cut in half by a Valdrix plasma beam. The destroyer Morning Star took a direct hit to its bridge, killing everyone inside instantly. Fighter squadrons were torn apart by enemy guns. Pilots screamed their last words into silent communication channels before their ships became nothing but fire and debris. Admiral Brustea watched the casualty reports scroll across her screen. Each name was a person she had sent to die. Each lost ship was hundreds of lives that would never return home. The weight of command pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain, but she did not waver. "Maintain pressure," she ordered. "We knew the cost. We accepted it. Now we pay it." Commander Tanaka's squadron had suffered heavy losses, but they had achieved their objective. The shield generators on 3 Valdric's command ships were down. Human heavy cruisers moved in for the kill. Zoroth watched his fleet lose ship after ship and felt his rage building. This was impossible. These primitives should have been crushed in minutes. Instead, they were bleeding his forces at an unacceptable rate. "How many have we lost?" he demanded. 347 ships destroyed, Supreme Commander. Another 200 damaged. 500 ships. In just a few hours. Against an enemy that should not have existed. And the humans. Approximately 400 ships destroyed, but they are not retreating. They continue to attack. Zoroth clenched his fists. He had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that knew it was dying and did not care? An enemy that traded life for life without hesitation? He opened a communication channel to the entire battlefield. "Humans," he said, his voice cold with fury. "You have impressed me. I did not think your species capable of such resistance. But your defiance is meaningless. I have summoned reinforcements. 5,000 additional warships will arrive in 6 hours. Your little fleet will be crushed. Your planet will be burned. And your species will be remembered only as a footnote in Valdric's history." On the Defiance, Castillo listened to the message with a stone face. 5,000 ships. In 6 hours, she looked at her tactical display. The Midnight Armada had lost 400 ships. 800 remained. Even if they destroyed every Valdric's vessel currently in orbit, they could not survive another wave 5 times larger. The bridge fell silent. Officers looked at each other with fear in their eyes. For the first time since the battle began, doubt crept into their hearts. Castillo stood from her chair. "We have 6 hours," she said quietly. 6 hours to do what needs to be done. "Admiral." Tanaka's voice came through the communication channel. "What are your orders?" Castillo looked at the tactical display. At the heart of the Valdric's fleet, she could see the Eternal Dominion. Zoroth's flagship. The command center of the entire invasion. A plan began to form in her mind. It was desperate. It was dangerous. It would cost lives. Possibly including her own, but it was the only chance they had. "All ships," she commanded. "New orders. Ignore the Valdric's fleet. Our target is the Eternal Dominion. We are going to kill Zoroth, and we are going to do it before his reinforcements arrive." For a moment, no one responded. Then Tanaka's voice came back, steady and sure. "Understood, Admiral. We will clear you a path." The Midnight Armada reformed its lines. 800 ships turned toward a single target. The battle was about to enter its final phase, and somewhere in the void of space, 5,000 Valdric's reinforcements were racing toward Earth. They commanded Earth to bow, then the midnight. Armada rose high and burned the sky red. Part 4. The longest 6 hours commander, Daisuke Tanaka, knew he was going to die today. He had known it from the moment Admiral Castillo announced the new plan. Someone would have to lead the way through the Valdric's fleet. Someone would have to draw enemy fire, absorb punishment, and create an opening for the heavy ships to reach the Eternal Dominion. That someone was him. He did not hesitate. He did not complain. He simply gathered his remaining pilots and gave them their orders. "We are the tip of the spear," he told them. "The fleet will follow where we lead. Our job is simple. We fly straight at Zoroth's flagship, and we do not stop until we get there or until we are dead. There is no retreat. There is no surrender. There is only forward." His pilots listened in silence. They were young, most of them. They had trained for years in secret, never knowing if they would ever see real combat. Now they were being asked to give everything, one by one. They nodded. "It has been an honor serving with you," Tanaka said. "Let us make sure humanity remembers this day." The assault began. Tanaka's squadron of 200 fighters launched from their carrier ships and formed a wedge formation. Behind them came the destroyers. Behind the destroyers came the cruisers. And behind them all came the Defiance, leading the heavy battleships in a straight line toward the enemy command vessel. The Valdrix responded with everything they had. Plasma beams cut through space like burning knives. Missiles by the thousands streaked toward the human fleet. Point defense guns created walls of fire that nothing should have been able to penetrate. But the humans kept coming. Tanaka weaved his fighter through the storm of death, his hands moving across the controls with the skill of a master. Around him, his pilots fell one by one. He heard their final words over the communication channel. Some screamed, some cursed. Some simply went silent as their ships became nothing but fire and metal. He did not stop. Valdric's cruiser moved to block his path. He flew directly at it, launching every missile his small fighter carried. The cruiser's shields flickered. A destroyer behind him finished the job, pouring fire into the weakened hull until it exploded. Gap created, Tanaka reported. All ships pushed through. The human fleet surged into the opening. They were taking terrible losses. For every Valdrix ship they destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. But they did not slow down. They could not afford to. On Earth, Director Marcus Webb stood in the command center of Project Midnight, watching the battle unfold on a massive screen. His old hands were shaking. He had spent 40 years building this fleet. Now he was watching it die, but he was also watching it fight. Activate ground defenses, he ordered quietly around the world. Hidden installations that had been disguised as power plants, research facilities, and military bases came to life. Massive energy cannons rose from the earth and pointed toward the sky. They had been built decades ago, using the same reverse-engineered technology as the Midnight Armada. They had never been tested in combat until now. Beams of concentrated energy shot upward from Earth's surface, reaching into orbit to strike at Valdrix ships from below. The enemy had not expected ground-based attacks. Their shields were designed to protect against threats from space, not from the planet they were trying to conquer. 3 Valdrix. Destroyers fell in the first volley. Zorath watched from his bridge as his fleet began to crumble from 2 directions. The human ships were pushing toward him with suicidal determination. The planet below was shooting at him with weapons that should not exist. And his reinforcements were still 4 hours away. Fall back to defensive positions around my ship, he ordered. Every vessel that can still fight will protect the Eternal Dominion. His remaining ships obeyed, forming a protective shell around the flagship. It was a strong position. Any attacker would have to fight through hundreds of warships to reach him, but the humans did not seem to care. Commander Tanaka's fighter squadron had been reduced to 30 pilots. 30 out of 200. But they were still flying, still fighting, still pushing forward. "This is Squadron Leader Tanaka to all remaining craft," he transmitted. "I am beginning my final approach to the Eternal Dominion. Cover me as long as you can." He pushed his engines to maximum power and flew straight at Zoroth's flagship. Valdric's guns tracked him, firing streams of plasma that filled the space around him with death. He dodged left. He dodged right. He rolled and spun and twisted through the fire with everything he had. A shot clipped his wing. Warning lights flashed across his cockpit. His ship began to spin. "Naka!" Admiral Castillo's voice crackled over the channel. "Report." He fought to regain control, pulling his damaged fighter back into a straight line. The Eternal Dominion was right in front of him now. He could see its massive hull, its glowing weapons, its towering bridge. "Admiral," he said calmly, "I have reached the target. Transmitting shield frequency data now. You will have a 30-second window after my attack. Use it well." Tanaka, pull back. "That is an order." But he was already committed. He aimed his fighter at the shield generator on the flagship's starboard side and pushed his engines beyond their limits. "Admiral, it has been an honor. Tell my daughter I did not die hiding. I died flying." His fighter struck the shield generator at full speed. The explosion tore through the Eternal Dominion's defenses, creating a gap in its protective barrier. Castillo watched the explosion from the bridge of the Defiance. For a moment, she could not speak. Then she forced the grief down and focused on what needed to be done. All ships. Tanaka has given us our opening. Do not waste it. The Defiance surged forward, leading the remaining heavy ships through the gap in the Valdrix formation. They were so close now. So close to Zoroth. So close to ending this. The Eternal Dominion loomed before them, damaged, but still deadly. Its weapons turned toward the approaching human fleet and began to fire. Ships fell. The cruiser Relentless exploded. The battleship Unconquered took a direct hit to its engines. But the Defiance kept coming. Zoroth watched the human's flagship approach and felt something he had never felt before. Respect and fear. Castillo opened a communication channel. Supreme Commander Zoroth. I am Admiral Una Castillo of the Midnight Armada. I offer you one chance. Surrender now and withdraw your forces from our system. Or die here today, wondering how a species you called primitive just destroyed your legacy. Zoroth's eyes burned with rage. Surrender? To humans? His pride would never allow it. I would rather die than kneel to lesser beings, he snarled. Castillo nodded slowly. So be it. She turned to her helmsman and gave the order that would change history. All ahead full. Ram the Eternal Dominion. Prepare to detonate the reactor core on impact. The bridge fell silent. Then her crew began carrying out the order. The Defiance accelerated toward Zoroth's flagship. Collision alarms screamed. The distance closed. 5 kilometers? 3-1? Castillo closed her eyes and thought of Earth, of everyone she was fighting for, of everyone she would never see again. The Defiance struck the Eternal Dominion with the force of a dying star. Both ships began to fall toward Earth, wrapped in fire, locked together in death, on the planet below. Millions of people watched 2 burning stars descend from the heavens. No. One knew which one carried their salvation, they commanded. Earth to bow, then the Midnight Armada rose high and burned the sky red. Part 5. The day Earth stood tall, the escape pod tumbled through the burning sky like a falling leaf. Inside, Admiral Una Castillo drifted in and out of consciousness. The last thing she remembered was the collision. The Defiance slamming into the Eternal Dominion. The order to abandon ship. Strong hands pushing her into the pod and launching it before she could protest. Her crew had saved her life. She did not know how many of them had saved their own. The pod's parachute deployed automatically as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Castillo opened her eyes just in time to see the ocean rushing up to meet her. Then there was impact, cold water, and darkness. When she awoke again, she was in a hospital bed. Sunlight was streaming through a window. A doctor was checking her vital signs. Welcome back, Admiral, the doctor said with a gentle smile. You have been asleep for 3 days. You have several broken ribs, a fractured arm, and a concussion. But you will live, Castillo tried to speak. Her throat was dry and raw. The doctor handed her a glass of water. The battle, she managed to croak. What happened? The doctor's smile widened. We won, Admiral. We won. In the hours after the Defiance rammed the Eternal Dominion, the Valdrix fleet had fallen into complete chaos. Supreme Commander Zoroth was dead. His flagship was destroyed. And without his authority, the rigid hierarchy of the Valdrix military collapsed like a house without its foundation. Ship captains argued with each other over who should take command. Some wanted to continue the attack. Others wanted to retreat. A few simply fled into deep space, abandoning their comrades entirely. The remaining ships of the Midnight Armada did not give them time to organize. They attacked the leaderless fleet with renewed fury, destroying vessel after vessel while the Valdrix struggled to respond. By the time the battle was over, more than 1,400 Valdrix ships had been reduced to debris orbiting Earth. The humans had lost 600 ships, thousands of lives. But they had won, and then came the reinforcements. 5,000 Valdrix warships dropped out of faster than light. Travel, expecting to find a conquered planet and a victorious commander waiting to greet them. Instead, they found wreckage. They found silence. they found a human fleet battered and bleeding, but still standing, turning its weapons toward them with cold determination. Director Marcus. Webb broadcast a message from the Project Midnight Command Center, Valdric's fleet. I am Director Webb, acting commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Your supreme commander is dead. Your invasion fleet is destroyed. We have eliminated over 1,400 of your ships. We lost 600. Do the mathematics. Then decide if you want to test us further. The Valdric's commanders did the mathematics. They looked at the debris field that had once been their invasion force. They looked at the human fleet, small but unbroken, ready to fight again. They thought about what it would cost to defeat such an enemy, not just in ships, not just in lives, but in reputation, in pride, in the knowledge that a species they had dismissed as primitive, it made them bleed. The reinforcement fleet withdrew. They did not surrender. They did not apologize. They simply turned their ships around and left. Not because they could not win, but because they finally understood something about humanity that Zorath had never grasped. Humans did not fight. It's like a species that feared death. They fought like a species that had already accepted it, and that made them more dangerous than any enemy the Valdric's had ever faced on Earth. The celebrations lasted for weeks. People danced in the streets of every city. Governments that had been preparing surrender documents instead wrote declarations of victory. The names of the fallen were read aloud on every broadcast. Honored as heroes who had given everything for their home, Commander Daisuke Tanaka was awarded the highest military honor every nation could offer. His daughter, a young woman of 20, who had believed her father died in a training accident 7 years ago, accepted the medals on his behalf. She stood straight and proud, just as he would have wanted. Admiral Castillo recovered from her injuries and returned to duty. She did not seek glory or praise. She simply went back to work, helping to rebuild the Midnight Armada, preparing for a future that was now full of both danger and possibility, because humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never forget. 1 year later, a Valdric's diplomatic vessel entered Earth's solar system. It came alone, without weapons, transmitting peace codes on all frequencies. A diplomat named Voreth descended to Earth's surface to negotiate trade agreements and mutual recognition treaties. The hegemony had decided that humanity was more useful as a trading partner than as an enemy. Voreth was escorted through the streets of New York on his way to the United Nations headquarters. Along the route, he passed a massive wall of black marble that had been erected in Central Park. He stopped to look at it. The wall was covered with names. Thousands of names. The soldiers, pilots, engineers, and crew members who had died in the Battle of Earth. At the top of the wall, carved in letters of gold, was a simple inscription. They asked us to kneel. We chose to stand. Voreth stood before the wall for a long time. A human aide asked if he wanted to continue. A moment, Voreth said quietly. His voice was soft, almost respectful. I am trying to understand. Understand what? The aide asked. Voreth turned to look at her. His alien eyes held something that might have been wonder. How a species so young, so fragile, so divided among yourselves could produce such courage, such unity, such willingness to die for each other. The aide thought about the question. Then she smiled. Because we are human, she said simply. It is what we do. Voreth nodded slowly. He looked at the wall one more time, at the names of the dead who had bought their planet's freedom with their lives. Then he turned and continued toward the United Nations. He would report to his superiors that the humans were not to be underestimated, that beneath their soft skin and short lifespans, there was something harder than any metal the Valdric's had ever forged, something that could not be conquered, something that would never surrender across the galaxy. Other species began to hear the story of Earth, the planet that had hidden an armada, the species that had killed a supreme commander, the civilization that had looked at 2,000 warships and chosen to fight instead of kneel, and they began to whisper a warning to each other, a warning that would echo through the stars for generations to come. Never corner humanity. They do not surrender. They do not forget. And when they rise, the sky burns red in her office at the rebuilt Naval Command. Admiral Una Castillo looked out her window at the night sky. The stars were bright tonight, brighter than they had ever seemed before. Somewhere out there, she knew, other civilizations were watching, waiting, wondering what humanity would do next. She smiled. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As one species, one people, one Earth, and they would never kneel again.